Here on our channel, people's stories come to life. Stories from different eras, professions, and destinies. Each of them follows their own path, their own life woven from circumstances, challenges, and choices. Before we step into their world, make sure to subscribe, and later, share your impressions in the comments. Now, let's begin. Some stories don't start with loud events. They start small, with details, with moments that seem insignificant, yet hold entire worlds within them. These are stories about people who never chose to be heroes. They simply lived, worked, made mistakes, learned from them, and kept moving forward. The lives of such people unfold like a slowly blooming flower, each petal revealing itself in its own time, each layer hiding new secrets, new pains, new joys. This is a story from a time when the world was just a little different. Morning light slips through narrow windows, folding gold across benches strewn with filings and curls of shaven metal. The air tastes faintly of oil and dusted brass. From somewhere below, the cathedral bells measure the working day, their sound softened by distance, like water running between stones. Within the small workshop, a boy leans over a vise, his brow furrowed, fingertips blackened with soot. Behind him, his father hums a hymn without melody, steady as the ticking of the clocks lining the walls. Every tool has its place, though none seem new. Files are polished thin from long service. Cloths, soaked in grease, hang like ribbons of old parchment. On the stove, a kettle murmurs. Beside it, the mother mends a frayed cuff. She moves quietly, careful not to disturb the concentration that rules the room. To outsiders, it may seem a silence of weight, but inside it lives a rhythm, a harmony between intention and patience. The boy's world is small but precise. The workshop smells of promise and permanence. He learns to see the logic of metal, how every tooth and pin holds a secret of balance. At dusk, when the gas lamps in the street flicker alive, he lingers beside the window. The city beyond, with its uneven stones and winter smoke, feels immense, yet he does not long for it. The world he knows fits into the arc of his father's hand as it guides a gear against the file, turning the sound of labor into something close to prayer. Their customers come rarely but with expectations. Wealthy men step across the threshold with cautious politeness, their boots leaving clean prints on the soot-dark floor. They speak of precision and punctuality, of the worth of time, as though it were coin minted only for them. The boy observes them in silence, careful and polite, copying his father's stillness. He senses, even before he understands, that the length of a handshake depends on the weight of a purse. When a gentleman leans too close to inspect their work, his father lowers his gaze, not out of fear, but as though recognizing a law of nature older than fairness. The mother, meanwhile, counts coins quietly, wrapping each in paper and locking them in a small wooden box. At night, she spreads her hands by the fire and smiles at her family's modest dinner. Bread, broth, sometimes a sliver of cheese saved from generous clients. For her, life's measure is not the number of clocks on the wall, but that no one goes hungry when the snow comes. The boy's tasks begin simple, sweeping filings, cleaning the brass dust from hinges, sorting gears by size. But he watches with a restless attentiveness that betrays future craft. Each screw he polishes glints to him like a star. When he whispers questions about why a balance swings so evenly, his father lifts his head, glances down the eyeglass and says, "Because it must." No other explanation is offered, nor needed. In the small hours, when only a single lamp burns, the boy traces tiny circles with chalk on the bench and dreams of assembling them into something whole. Outside, wind curls through the shutter gaps. The city sleeps, except for the watchers, night guards, clerks copying ledgers, and craftsmen like his father, who repair the hearts of machines that measure noblemen's hours. In their solitude, time itself seems heavier, as if aware of being counted. The first watch he touches beyond cleaning is a battered silver piece a customer left as payment for debt. His father hands it to him without ceremony and says only, "Make it breathe again." The glass is cracked, the spring fractured, the back dented from a fall. The boy sits for nights, reassembling the pieces with trembling resolve. He makes mistakes, scuffs the plate, loses a screw to the floor. When he at last winds it and hears a faint, irregular tick, the sound moves through him like the beginning of music. He brings the revived watch to his father at dawn. The old man listens, turns the piece in his palm, and nods once. The gesture is small, yet the boy feels it like a coronation. His mother, setting out bread and milk, smiles at the anxious pride in his eyes. The watch, though imperfect, works. That is enough for now. Days follow, much alike. The rasp of the file, tea cooling too quickly, the bright ring of the hammer's touch. Sometimes neighbors stop by with gossip, the dying candle merchant, the new tax on imported copper, the rumors of French unrest carried by travelers along the river. The father grunts, but seldom comments. He distrusts power, even the talk of it, muttering that the world's wheels rarely turn for men like them. The mother sighs, but says nothing. Their life runs by smaller cycles, candle to candle, gear to gear. When other children play by the river, the boy sketches tools on scrap paper. He copies shapes from catalogs and old manuals his father collected, filling margins with fanciful designs, imagined machines that could tell not just the hour, but the changing of the wind. Once, he presents a drawing of a watch that writes its own notes with a small mechanism. His father chuckles, pats the drawing flat, and tells him dreams are fine as long as they do not cost extra oil. The turning point of that quiet youth comes one winter evening. Snow presses against the windows, muting every sound until the only thing audible is the ticking that fills the room. The boy, now nearly grown, sits near the fire, carving a tiny handle from a discarded piece of wood. His fingers ache, but he persists. By midnight, he holds a small screwdriver, rough but functional. It glimmers in lamplight, as though waiting for purpose. His father notices the next morning. Without a word, he takes the tool, tests its balance, and returns it silently. The boy sees the faintest lift of his father's mouth. In that moment, no praise could mean more. Later that week, the boy uses the screwdriver to reassemble the escapement of an old wall clock. Its click, once restored, echoes through the shop's low ceiling, mingling with the scent of oil and warm dust. He feels, for the first time, that he can shape not only metal, but his own place within the measured order of things. Spring comes subtly to Geneva, melting snow streaks the gutters, and market voices grow louder in the square. Watches arrive for cleaning after the damp of winter. The boy, taller now, assists his father with steady confidence. They work in tandem, each anticipating the other's motion. The mother, her hair streaked with gray, still mends cloth beside them, humming to herself. In the evenings, she tends a small pot of thyme on the windowsill. Its scent lingers faintly against the smell of brass, giving the air a humble sweetness. One afternoon, a noble client appears, trailing cold air and perfume. His gloves shine with imported leather, his voice smooth and dry as parchment. The boy watches as his father bows slightly and accepts the gentleman's golden watch for repair. Coins change hands with reluctant grace. The noble leaves as swiftly as he came, but his brief intrusion unsettles the boy. He notices how his father's face hardens afterward, how his hands move slower. Later that night, the father says softly, almost to himself, "Their time costs more than ours." The boy does not reply. He only listens to the wall clock beating its tireless rhythm. Years seem to drift rather than pass. The boy's skill deepens until even his father privately defers to his touch for finer adjustments. Yet at heart, he remains unsure of his worth beyond the bench. Trusting those close to him, cautious of every master above him. That balance defines his small philosophy. To him, the world resembles a clock, intricate, inevitable, yet fragile in hidden places. By the time he carries the family's work to market alone, the faces of traders and clients all blend into one rhythm of demand and barter. And still, in moments between tasks, he turns the little wooden screwdriver in his hand as if it held a secret. Perhaps it does, for within that humble tool lies the memory of a sleepless night, the proof that the sound of brass can be more than labor, it can be a heartbeat. When evening shadows fill the workshop, he closes the shutters and listens. The city outside ticks in its own unsteady way, horses clattering over cobbles, shopkeepers counting, distant laughter drifting from the taverns. But his world remains small, ordered and steady. The lamps burn low, gears rest on the bench, and the last sound before sleep is the same as the first at dawn, the faint, ceaseless pulse of time made by human hands. The morning air of the merchant quarter carries the scent of roasting coffee and soldered metal, mingling in narrow alleys where signs creak in the wind. Snow still crowns the rooftops, though the streets are already busy, horses steaming beside carts filled with silk, tobacco, and foreign goods. In the heart of this commotion stands the workshop of Master Lenoir, watchmaker by reputation and tyrant by temperament. Inside, the young apprentice, once the boy who built his own screwdriver, labors beside older hands, measuring hours not by the church bell, but by the deepening ache in his back. The room hums like a hive. On long benches lie half-open timepieces, whose balance wheels tremble like beating hearts. Sunlight filters through warped glass, turning motes of brass dust into floating sparks. The apprentices work mostly in silence. Lenoir forbids chatter. A single misplaced tool can cost more than a week's pay. Yet laughter finds its way in during the breaks, quick and muffled, stolen like sips of brandy between the ticks of duty. In the evenings, after the master departs for his supper, the apprentices relax. They talk of ambitions whispered low, dreams of opening personal shops, going abroad, or attracting patronage from the wealthy whose coins smell faintly of perfume. The young apprentice listens more than he speaks. His manner is calm, his humor thin but warm, and his caution around those in power already well practiced. He trusts only the few who share his long hours and his thin gruel. The master's wife runs accounts and inspects every finished piece as if divining its fortune. She smiles rarely, her voice measured and proper, but sometimes her eyes betray pity for the exhausted young men at the benches. On rainy days when the light fails, the apprentices work by candle or oil lamp, their sight blurring, yet precision demanded no less. Each tick of the clocks under repair sounds more like a command than reassurance. The young man rents a narrow attic room off Rue de Temple, near the river. At night, he eats salted bread, a wedge of cheese, and watches the faint haze of lamplight through the small window. The laughter from the tavern below rises through the floorboards, softened by the hum of water rushing through pipes. He spends those quiet hours sketching ideas on scraps of parchment, gears shaped like petals, escapements fine enough to tremble at a breath. Most drawings come to nothing, but their making eases his solitude. Work changes him slowly. His hands, once smooth, become calloused. His eyes sharpen to imperfections smaller than dust. The master begins to trust him with finer repairs, the intricate regulator of a marine chronometer, the delicate engraving of names on the backplates. Now and then, patrons visit to inspect progress. They smell of musk and travel, speaking in polite tones just above condescension. He bows too deeply, smiles too quickly, never meeting their eyes too long. The lesson of his father remains: be cautious before those who buy time with coin. Geneva's streets outside the workshop shift with new trades and loud debates. Philosophers argue near the fountains. Pamphlets spread talk of freedom and natural rights. Yet to the apprentice, freedom means only one thing: the day when he may weld his own name above a door. For now he hoards what few francs he can spare, counting them in the tin box beneath his mattress each month. The total grows painfully slow, like a clock wound against its own spring. One evening, hauling firewood to the workshop, he meets a merchant, one of Lenoir's frequent clients, arguing loudly about a delayed order. The merchant's coat gleams with imported buttons, each worth half a week's wage. When the quarrel ends, the apprentice carefully returns the man's dropped glove. The merchant barely nods his thanks. Still, he presses a coin into the apprentice's palm, small but shining, and says, "Keep the world punctual, boy." The words sound generous, but the tone lingers like frost. Months slide into years. Apprentices come and go, their names forgotten, their laughter replaced by new voices. The young man remains, quiet and consistent. He earns the master's trust and occasional affection, shown in brief, gruff nods rather than speech. On his 21st birthday, he receives a gift, a set of files wrapped in worn cloth, tools once belonging to Lenoir's own father. The master says nothing sentimental, but his eyes dwell on the apprentice an extra moment before turning away. That summer, the apprentice begins to help with commissions brought by private couriers, pieces meant for collectors or the wealthy elite. Among them appears a small golden watch sealed in velvet. It needs delicate repair, a cracked jewel, a misaligned spring, and subtle adjustment in the escapement. While cleaning it, the apprentice notices something unusual, a fine engraving hidden beneath the case, nearly erased by time. It reads in small Latin letters, Veritas in motu, truth in motion. The phrase lodges in his mind long after the watch is returned to its owner. His life outside the workshop remains sparse but not joyless. He walks by the Rhone after supper, watching light scatter across the river. Street vendors cry their wares, children chase each other under the bridges. Sometimes he visits a tavern where a fiddler plays tunes of the mountains. There, with a few fellow apprentices, he allows himself brief laughter and wine. When talk turns to rebellion in France or politics, he listens but says little, smiling behind his cup. Words about power too often cost more than the silence around them. A thin friendship grows between him and an older apprentice, Etienne, a kind man with restless eyes. They share food and scraps of news, sometimes pooling coins to buy a candle for late-night work on personal projects. Etienne speaks of leaving Geneva one day, maybe heading to London or Lyon, where craftsman's skill earns better reward. The young watchmaker half believes him. Dreams are fragile things, and Etienne drinks too much to protect them from reality. In early autumn, Master Lenoir falls ill. The apprentices keep the shop open under the quiet leadership of his wife. She assigns most delicate commissions to the young man, whose patient workmanship earns murmurs of respect even among rivals. One evening, when the shop finally closes, Madame Lenoir finds him still bent over a timepiece, his candle nearly spent. She watches silently before saying, "You have his steadiness. Use it well." Then she leaves him in the breathing hush of ticking metal. As winter advances, news arrives that the master will not recover. The workshop changes tone. Tools move more cautiously. Laughter fades. When at last the master dies, his apprentices escort the coffin through the narrow streets, their black coats blending with soot and snow. Bells toll faintly from St. Pierre Cathedral. The young man walks behind the widow, his heart caught between grief and awakening ambition. He can feel the old order winding down, a gear slipping free. Months later, the widow closes the shop. Each apprentice receives wages owed, tools divided, and modest letters of recommendation written in her fine hand. The young man packs his possessions in a wooden chest, tools, a few drawings, the tin of savings, and the little screwdriver he made in youth. On the final day, he lingers at the empty bench, touching the neat circle where the master's lamp once burned its mark into the wood. There is sadness, but also silence full of possibility. He rents a small room overlooking the river's bend near the lower bridge. It smells of wax and damp wood. There, by candlelight, he begins his own practice, slowly, cautiously. Clients trickle in, a merchant's wife with a maple watch, a bookseller whose timepiece refuses to strike noon, a foreign sailor bringing a rusted chronometer. Work gathers like sediment on the riverbed, little by little forming stability. He eats better, sleeps less, and discovers that solitude feels sharper when paired with pride. By the time spring flattens the snows on the peaks, his name starts to pass among traders as the quiet repairman of Rue de Temple. It is no great fame, but enough to keep his hands busy and his stomach filled. On some evenings, he stands by the window and watches the people below, a living clockwork of gestures and bargains, harsh words and gentle laughter. The world turns, gears mesh, and in their slow symmetry, he senses a kind of truth. One late evening, a courier knocks at his door, carrying a parcel wrapped in dark velvet. No sender's mark, only a brief note. For adjustment, care of the watchmaker of Rue du Temple. Inside lies an exquisite pocket watch, unlike any he has seen. Its mechanism subtle, its balance glinting with a strange alloy that catches candlelight like frozen water. He examines it, tracing the signature engraved beneath the case, an aristocrat's name known across Geneva. He lifts the tool once carved in boyhood and begins the careful work of disassembly. Outside, the wind hums through the shutters, and street lamps quiver upon the river. The apprentice listens to the tick fade, then vanish. Within that silence begins the faint feeling, both exhilarating and uneasy, that time, so precisely measured, has started to turn differently for him. March sunlight glints off the rooftops, slipping between tall houses and spilling into the square of Geneva's watchmakers' district. The smell of melted wax and metal polish fills the air. Behind the old market hall, a modest sign of clean script declares the name of a new craftsman, plain, unadorned, but already whispered with approval. The watchmaker of Rue du Temple. Inside, the workshop is narrow yet orderly. Shelves hold glass jars of screws sorted by size and luster. A single magnifying lamp burns over the workbench. The steady rasp of the file gives rhythm to his quiet mornings. He rises early each day, opens the shutters, and watches the city rouse itself from fog. Apprentices carrying coal, clerks hurrying to offices, women exchanging gossip under shawls. Then he begins his work, adjusting the tiny teeth of brass that never forgive haste. The skill earned through years of disciplined hands now shapes his living. Clients come, merchants, clerks, sailors, modest nobles, each leaving a few coins and a piece of their time behind. Though his shop now bears his name, he remains the same patient craftsman as before. Pride lies not in recognition, but in completion. His humor, still dry, shields a tenderness he rarely shows. His caution before the powerful remains unshaken. Those who know him say he laughs easily among equals, but turns quiet when wealth enters the room. Perhaps he learned that silence protects dignity better than words. That spring brings a visitor whose presence seems to mark a turning point. A carriage stops before the shop. From it steps an elegantly dressed nobleman with sharp shoulders and eyes like polished steel. His cane bears a carved serpent winding toward a golden handle. The doorbell chimes softly as he enters, his boots leaving trace prints of river mud on the clean floor. The watchmaker rises from his bench, wiping his hands on a cloth. The nobleman introduces himself without hesitation, his voice smooth, practiced. He explains that he possesses a pocket watch of rare construction, rumored to house a mechanism devised by a French craftsman now dead. It no longer keeps accurate time. The nobleman requires discretion and the highest skill. When he unveils the watch, Even the steady watchmaker cannot conceal his wonder. The piece gleams like captured sunlight. Its casing shows fine enamel work depicting the phases of the moon, each rendered so delicately that it seems almost alive. But it is the mechanism inside that arrests him. A balance wheel of unusual color, pale silver with an edge of blue, unlike any metal he has touched before. Beneath the filigree cover glimmers an engraving of the owner's crest, nearly worn away. The nobleman watches with satisfaction as his craftsman admires it. The work takes weeks. Each day, the watchmaker examines the piece under magnification, adjusts, tests, waits, adjusts again. He notes how the alloy bends light differently, almost as though it resists being seen clearly. At night, when the city sleeps, he returns to his bench to study it further. Candlelight trembles over the desk. The watch glows faintly, its tick uneven and uncertain. He keeps a notebook of measurements and sketches, though he never writes the noble name, only an initial marked discreetly. During those quiet nights, thoughts of mortality and precision mingle in his mind. A watch, he reflects, is only alive so long as a human hand winds it. When that hand ceases, the illusion of eternal order dissolves. Time is not the same for the living and the dead. He wonders if the nobleman, in his airy mansion, feels the same unease when he hears bells toll across the lake at midnight. When the repair is complete, the watch beats flawlessly once more. The nobleman returns, inspects the result, and appears satisfied. He pays more than requested, insisting the extra coin is for peace of mind. Before leaving, he asks the watchmaker to keep the old balance wheel replaced during the operation. "For curiosity's sake," he says lightly. "But guard it well. It cost a small fortune to obtain." He departs, leaving behind not only payment, but a faint scent of amber and enigma. That very evening, the watchmaker locks the balance wheel in a drawer, uneasily aware of its weight, though it is scarcely heavier than a feather. He means to return it later, perhaps cleaned and wrapped in proper cloth. Yet days pass, and each time he opens that drawer, he finds a reason to close it again. The metal's sheen unsettles him, like a coin pulled from deep water. A week later, rumor spreads through the narrow streets. An aristocrat has been found dead in his home near the lake. The papers avoid details, but talk in the taverns grows bold. Some whisper of debt, others of poison, still others of theft. The servants claim a valuable trinket vanished from the estate, a pocket watch, gold and costly, gone without trace. Hearing it, the watchmaker feels his heartbeat falter, then quicken. He does not speak of what he knows. He waits 3 days before the constable calls. The man's voice carries formality rather than suspicion. He asks routine questions, whether the watchmaker ever did business with the deceased, whether he had delivered any item recently. The craftsman answers calmly, neither lying nor volunteering more than necessary. The constable, bored or certain, makes notes and leaves without threat. Still, the conversation lingers like frost on the window. When night falls, the watchmaker opens the locked drawer. The balance wheel rests where he left it, gleaming gently in lamplight. For a long time he turns it between his fingers, studying its smooth arc. Near the inner rim lie faint scratches, perhaps from wear, or from a hurried repair long before his, he cannot tell. Yet as he holds it to his ear, he imagines a whisper beneath the silence. an echo of the ticking it once governed. He sets it down, closes the drawer, and bolts the workshop door more firmly than usual. In the days that follow, ordinary life resumes, but quietly distorted. Work continues, repairs, cleanings, engraving of initials, but each sound, each movement feels colored by unease. Customers speak, yet their words slip past like water. He laughs in conversation, but smiles more slowly. He fears the gaze of authority, though none seeks him. Only when occupied does he forget for a moment. One evening, a rival watchmaker enters his shop under pretense of friendly greeting. The man, heavy-set and shrewd, admires the gears on display and pretends enthusiasm for craft. But in his eyes glimmers something closer to curiosity, or envy. He asks casually whether the noble patron had indeed favored his services. The watchmaker gives a neutral answer, though he senses gossip overtaking discretion. Geneva is small. Every whisper multiplies in echoing alleys. That night, sleep eludes him. He dreams of gears turning endlessly with no spring to drive them, a dance of lifeless precision. When he wakes, the candle has burned low, and the sound of rain against the shutters deepens the confusion between minutes and hours. He sits at his bench until dawn, rewinding the same simple pocket watch from an old client, as if keeping his own nervous system intact through repetition. Weeks stretch into a blur. Slowly, suspicion thickens in invisible air. An apprentice from another workshop mentions that the constable's inquiries continue. A client hesitates before leaving his watch, as if fearful it too might vanish. Even the neighbors lower their voices when greeting him. He feels the ground shift beneath routine, a tremor he cannot halt. The difference between guilt and the appearance of guilt, growing narrower by the hour. One afternoon, he walks to the lake seeking calm. Wind skims the water's surface, scattering the reflection of clouds. He remembers walking these same streets as a boy with his father, carrying repaired clocks to customers. Life then smaller, cleaner, bound only by hunger and hope. Now, the same world seems larger, yet more fragile. He wonders whether mastery brings peace or simply a sharper view of danger. Returning home, he opens his door to silence. On the workbench lies a folded letter bearing no seal. It contains only a sentence in careful handwriting. When truth stops moving, it rusts. Beneath it rests a faint fingerprint pressed into the page. He reads the words twice, sensing both warning and riddle. The unknown author signs only with an initial, possibly the same as the engraving once found inside the noble's watch. That night the wind rattles the shutters, carrying a low whine from the harbor's misty lamps. The watchmaker sits beside the locked drawer, uncertain of what to do. Return the balance to the authorities and invite suspicion? Destroy it and lose the only proof of innocence or of guilt? The flame wavers. Shadows of gears stretch across the wall like the hands of unseen clocks. He closes his eyes and listens. Outside, bells mark the 10th hour. Inside, the room holds its breath between ticks. From now on, each sound of metal will carry a different weight. A watch, once mere machinery, has become a question no craft can answer. The wheel that once measured time has stopped, yet somehow it continues, soundless, within the watchmaker's mind. And so for the first time in his life, precision fails him. The beat of his heart is no longer even, it is waiting. Summer presses against Geneva like a slow breath. The air smells of metal and wet stone, carrying from the river damp echoes of the mills. Work continues, yet the watchmaker's days unfold with wary precision. He no longer counts them in hours, but in small tremors, faces that turn too quickly on the street, footsteps that hesitate outside his door. The mystery of the nobleman's death has not faded. It lingers like a subtle corrosion on every bright surface. The constable's questions have grown sharper. Each inquiry arrives without menace, but with the weight of procedure. Records of commissions, signatures, bills of sale. The watchmaker produces them all, neat and ordered. The noble client's payment had been exact. No coin remains unaccounted for. Yet even perfect logic casts long shadows. When the constable leaves, promising to keep in touch, silence expands until it presses the breath from the room. Still, he works. To halt would be to invite collapse. His craft becomes refuge, though even that sanctuary grows uncertain. Friends greet him politely, but do not linger. Clients choose other shops, citing convenience. Only a few loyal customers remain: a bookseller, an aging tailor, and a metal supplier named Laurent, whose jovial voice and easy manners mask a perpetual calculation behind the eyes. Laurent supplies brass and alloys from France, claiming contacts among smelters across the Jura Mountains. The watchmaker thinks of him as companion and danger in equal measure. They first met years earlier, when the watchmaker newly opened his shop. Back then, Laurent's laughter had filled the room like sunlight through dust. Now, it sounds heavier. One evening, the supplier brings him a bar of gleaming metal, claiming it to be an alloy newly tested by Parisian artisans. Its sheen almost matches the strange blue edge of the lost balance wheel. The watchmaker's pulse quickens. He runs a finger along the surface and feels faint warmth that seems unnatural for cold metal. Laurent grins. "Valuable enough to keep secrets," he says, pouring wine from the bottle he carried. That night, they drink by candlelight, conversation wandering to craft, to the price of tin, to fortune's small cruelties. The watchmaker laughs occasionally, though his laughter ends sooner than Laurent's. Inside, suspicion grows like slow rust. What does Laurent know about the noble's private watch? And why does he bring this alloy now? When Laurent leaves, promising to return with more, the watchmaker hides the metal beneath old cloth in the cupboard. Its shimmer lingers behind his eyelids as he extinguishes the lamp. Sleep brings restless visions, gears spinning without purpose, blue light bleeding from their edges, faces of friends folding into one another. He wakes before dawn, drenched in sweat, listening to the faint creak of the building settling, the pulse of his own craft echoing from within. Geneva thrives, meanwhile. Markets chatter with news from Paris, pamphlets warning of unrest. Philosophers in cafes argue that machines symbolize the order once found in faith, while others claim they mock human vanity. To the watchmaker, the sound of these debates resembles his ticking room, order competing with chaos. Yet practical fears absorb him more: declining business, rising materials, wider rumor. Each week brings some reminder: a sideways glance from a merchant, a passing jest about the murderous precision of craftsmen. Once, someone leaves a slip of paper under his door, bearing only the words, "Where is its heart?" He burns it at once, though the smell of charred ink haunts him for days. In August, the bookseller visits to have his wall clock adjusted. As the watchmaker oils the gears, the old man speaks in riddling comfort. "Rumor, my friend, is a clock that winds itself." The phrase stays with him long after the customer departs. He repeats it subconsciously while walking home that night along the lakefront, where moonlight glazes the water. Beneath that silver calm, everything seems poised for disaster. Autumn brings colder mornings and a creeping sense of being observed. One afternoon, Laurent returns with another supply of alloys, his talk brisk, his manner evasive. He speaks of a buyer in Lyon interested in experimental metals. "Perhaps something like your late noble's curiosity," he adds, half teasing. The watchmaker's hand pauses mid-count. Laurent's smile holds no kindness. Later that evening, the watchmaker visits a tavern he rarely enters. There, voices mingle with smoke and spilled ale. He listens to gossip drifting through the crowd, the constable's renewed investigation, hints of contraband trade in rare ores. A sailor claims such metals are smuggled through Geneva disguised as clock parts. He drinks little, surveys faces, wonders how truths hide better than lies in lighted rooms. Returning home through misted alleys, he sees the shadow of a man by his workshop window, then nothing. Inside, nothing is disturbed, yet the faint smell of metal polish hangs in air when no polishing was done. Fear begins to pulse quietly in rhythm with each clock. He finds solace in routine again, winding watches, trimming springs, engraving plates with looping initials. Yet the delicate patience once central to his work now feels brittle. Small mistakes slip in, an uneven gear tooth, an over-tightened screw, each error intolerable to a man who built his life on precision. He blames fatigue, but suspects guilt's invisible hand resting on his shoulder. The city prepares for winter. Candle smoke darkens ceilings. River mist freezes on window panes. Laurent visits less often, claiming journeys across the mountains. On quiet nights, the watchmaker examines the hidden metal bar again. Under lamplight, its strange blue hue deepens, recalling the noble's lost mechanism. He runs tests, polishing fragments, comparing density, but finds no known formula. His notes fill pages, his anxiety widens. The old superstition his father once mentioned returns to memory. A watch missing its heart brings misfortune to its maker. As he polishes the tool, once carved in boyhood, that thought feels less absurd. He begins to see metaphors everywhere, the way a balance trembles before finding form, the way time hesitates at every half-swing. One fog-bound afternoon, the constable reappears, hat dripping rain. His tone remains courteous, but a tentative edge cuts through. Questions circle closer this time, about Laurent, about metallurgical trades, about the nobleman's connections beyond Geneva. The watchmaker answers calmly, choosing silence when speech could twist. Before leaving, the constable glances at the rows of ticking clocks and remarks, "So many hearts to keep alive." Then the door closes softly, leaving the words echoing unnaturally long. After he leaves, thunder rolls around the lake. The watchmaker pours wine and stares at the metal hidden in his palm. Its glow seems dull in stormlight, but grows bright again once lightning fades. He wonders whether it reflects illumination or absorbs it. For the first time, he contemplates leaving Geneva altogether. Yet how does a man outrun time measured by his own inventions? In the following weeks, letters arrive without signatures. Some are blank, others bear single words: truth, guilt, alloy, debt, handwritten in the same deliberate style as the note once found beside the drawer. Someone plays a quiet game, and he is its axis. Yet he cannot ask for help without revealing all. Alone, surrounded by the pulse of clocks, he begins to speak softly to them, as if seeking counsel. The steady ticks offer neither absolution nor advice, only unbroken rhythm. Then, one late evening, while sweeping filings into the bin, he notices fresh footprints dampening the dust near the back door, boots larger than his own. He checks the lock. It remains intact. The air, however, smells faintly of smoke and sea salt, like Laurent's imported goods. On the bench, the alloy bar is gone. In its place lies the same folded paper with the words, "Truth should move." A chill spreads from spine to fingertips. He sits until dawn without moving, surrounded by clocks that answer one another like murmuring witnesses. Outside, Geneva wakes to the sound of bells tolling the 6th hour. But to him, the city's rhythm feels different, hesitant, as if time itself fears what comes next. When morning breaks, he opens the window for the first time in weeks. Cold air rushes in, clean and colorless. Below, merchants raise their shutters, calling for trade. The watchmaker watches their ordinary gestures and feels envy for their noise. In his own silent room, he senses every tick drawing him closer to something unseen. The missing heart of the watch, the vanishing metal, the friend too fond of secrets. For now he returns to his bench, hands steady, though his thoughts reel. Outside, the cathedral strikes the new hour. Inside, the old superstition lingers. When a watch loses its heart, another must stop to keep balance. He wonders which one will. The year tilts toward winter, and with it comes a dark stillness. The air smells of snow not yet fallen, and the river moves with a slower pulse. In the watchmaker's shop, the tools stand orderly, untouched. Days slip past like pages unturned. The city outside stirs with talk of scarcity and unrest, but within these four walls, only the soft rhythm of isolated thought remains. Since the disappearance of the alloy bar, he lives between unease and frost. Laurent has not returned. No letters, no couriers, not even tavern whispers. Silence, where his boisterous laugh once filled the air. The watchmaker moves through his tasks like a figure wound by invisible hands, cleaning, oiling, winding, each gesture timed, each completed without conviction. His customers think him ill, though illness of body would have been a mercy. One morning, the constable visits again, this time without his formal hat, as if seeking warmth rather than justice. He asks whether the watchmaker has seen his supplier recently. The tone rests between question and implication. The craftsman offers the truth he can afford. Laurent had promised a delivery, then vanished. The constable remarks that a body was found by the river bend, perhaps a traveler, perhaps not. The description lingers unpleasantly close. When asked to identify, the watchmaker shakes his head before he hears the rest. After the man leaves, the shop loses its proportions. He moves through it as through a dream where objects have meaning but no weight. Even the clocks seem distant, some out of tune, others slowing imperceptibly. He spends that evening beside the fire, staring into its dull orange light, the taste of iron on his tongue. He feels neither innocence nor guilt, only the drag of time refusing to advance. Days lengthen brutally in their sameness. He walks through Geneva's outskirts, where the cottages crowd near vineyards stripped to bare vines. In a roadside inn, warmth and gossip gather like fog. A farmer speaks of frozen tracks near the eastern gate. Another of the found man's drowned horse. The watchmaker sits by the stove, silent. The innkeeper, a woman with kind eyes, pours him watered wine and asks no questions. Her small kindness weighs heavier than blame. Each night he dreams of the missing balance wheel. In his vision, it spins endlessly within a void, casting light across faces he once trusted. Some mouths move, forming words he cannot hear. He wakes with fingers clenched, as though gripping invisible tools. The bed creaks under his shifting breath. When morning comes, frost patterns his window in shapes resembling gears, each sharp, each melting too soon. 2 weeks pass before he resolves to act. Waiting accomplishes nothing. Silence has become a second crime. He packs his tools in a leather bag, wraps his coat tighter, and sets out beyond the city's edge, following old trade routes Laurent once described. The path climbs gently into hills veiled by low clouds. Wind carries the faint scent of pine and faraway smoke. Along the way he measures progress by instinct, not time, a strange freedom, though not a comforting one. At dusk he reaches a hamlet near the frozen river where Laurent was said to trade. A small inn leans against the hillside, its windows clouded with breath. Inside, fire crackles and lamps burn with resinous smoke. The patrons notice him but return quickly to their mugs. He inquires of the keeper about the merchant of metals. The man frowns, mutters something about poor decisions and heavy pockets, and gestures toward the stable by the river bend. The next morning he finds it, a broken plank wall, the smell of decay beneath frost. Nearby, a half-buried crate reveals dull fragments of alloy, edges eaten by water. He kneels to touch one. It bears the same blue sheen, though dulled by silt. For a moment, he cannot breathe. A sound, perhaps a crow shifting on the tree above, startles him back. Whether Laurent abandoned his treasure or died guarding it no longer matters. In that mixture of mud and metal lies the conclusion of greed, brightness sinking into earth. A farmer from nearby fields finds him there and helps to lift the heavier boards back into place. When asked who he searches for, the watchmaker murmurs, "A man I once trusted." The farmer nods without curiosity, perhaps recognizing the tone more than the words. They share a brief silence before the man mentions how floods claim the careless each spring. The explanation feels both plausible and merciful. That night, the watchmaker rests again in the inn by the fire. He cleans his hands, but the scent of river stays. In his room, he examines a splinter of the recovered metal, small enough to hide within his palm. It gives no reflection, as though light itself refuses communion. He senses that its purpose, like the missing balance wheel, was never purely mechanical. Whatever secrets bound the nobleman and Laurent together now dissolve in cold water. Yet one truth hardens inside him. Silence can shield the living only so long before it buries them alongside the dead. He returns to Geneva before dawn. Snow thickens across the road, muting every sound. The city greets him with gray shutters and smoke. Inside his shop, he unwraps his tools with deliberate care, placing each at its rightful station. The order comforts him, a trace of reason left intact. Still, the fragment rests in his drawer, a reminder of how easily perfection breaks when touched by men's desires. The constable arrives 2 days later with restrained courtesy. "The supplier is confirmed dead," he announces. "An accident, perhaps." Too many secrets drowned with him. He studies the watchmaker's face, then adds, "Your name was mentioned among his associates, but no one speaks harm yet." The craftsman nods, thanks him for the notice, and offers tea that goes untouched. When the official departs, the door's closing echoes like judgment postponed. From that moment, the watchmaker decides he will speak no more of missing metals or dead nobles. Words have become instruments too sharp for safe use. Instead, he channels all into work. Watches line the shelves anew, finely tuned, their timing immaculate. He restores a sense of rhythm, though inwardly each tick sounds like confession. Sometimes he finds himself whispering apologies to his creations, as if they bear the strain of his secrets. Winter deepens. Candle wax hardens before it burns fully. Breath curls white in the air. Yet slowly, his reputation begins to recover. Patrons return, drawn by skill and the comfort of routine. He listens to their small troubles, delayed shipments, rising prices, sickness at home, and finds in them an unexpected solace. They remind him that guilt is only one form of suffering among many. One evening, while adjusting a customer's clock, he hears faint steps outside. Opening the door, he finds no person, only a folded envelope left against the threshold. Inside lies a short note in the same precise hand as before. Order requires a keeper. Truth waits still. Beneath the message rests a delicate cog, identical in alloy to the lost balance wheel. Its edges catch lamplight softly, almost tenderly. The craftsman turns it between his fingers, feeling its chill. The mystery, it seems, has not ended. It has merely changed hands. He locks the piece away unseen. Around him the clocks keep their measured course, each striking the hour with identical certainty. Yet, beneath that steady chorus, another rhythm forms, quieter, closer to his heart. The awareness that every perfect mechanism carries within it the possibility of fracture, and that the silence between ticks is sometimes louder than sound itself. That night, snow finally falls, covering the city in bright stillness. He opens his window to the cold, lets the flakes settle on his palm, and watches them melt against skin warmed by work. The wind hums between chimneys like breath through a sleeping body. For the first time in weeks, he feels a fragile peace, though he knows peace, like precision, cannot last without tending. Still, he lets the moment linger, listening as the world outside turns softer, quieter, almost humane. Spring arrives, though Geneva barely notices. The snow recedes, leaving the streets slick black and gray, and merchants sweep the thresholds of their shops with damp brooms. The watchmaker rises early as habit dictates, though now he wakes not from rest, but from dreams that end too abruptly to remember. He leans by the window before dawn, watching mist dissolve from the lake. Clock towers strike uncertainly through the fog, as if the city itself has forgotten its rhythm. His own time, however, has become deliberate again, each hour marked by work, each silence purposeful. Clients return, cautious but steady. A few apprentices from other workshops seek to learn under him. He accepts two. Both are clever with tools, but impatient in spirit. Their youth reminds him of the hopeful years long gone, ambition mixed with fear, the heart still believing that craft alone can order a chaotic world. His reputation has grown strange. Some call him gifted, others unlucky. But all agree he works with unmatched precision. Among craftsmen, reputation clings harder than truth, yet behind his calm demeanor, something in him has shifted. He has begun designing a new clock, unlike any before, one without numerals, hands, or ornament, only a smooth brass face that conceals its works entirely. It will keep perfect time but show none. He calls it, in private thought, the silent measure. The project consumes his nights. On the workbench, sketches multiply, concentric gears drawn in ink darker than the metal itself, mechanisms built to regulate not minutes but balance. He salts bread beside the lamp and eats while working. The apprentices hear the faint scratching of metal long after the rest of the city sleeps. None dare intrude. Letters reach Geneva from France, speaking of new revolutions, new clocks to count a nation's hours from zero. Change lies in the air, but for him, history remains internal. What is time, he often wonders, when every attempt to measure it becomes an act of fear? He no longer seeks answers in theology or philosophy, only in the quiet logic of shifting wheels. The lost balance wheel, the drowned metals, the cryptic notes, all seem to belong to a single design whose purpose he can almost sense but cannot yet name. The constable does not return now. The investigation has cooled, replaced by fresher scandals. People talk instead of borders closing, of debts unpaid, of the uncertain future of trade. Laurent's widow sends word once to reclaim whatever remains of her husband's business, but the watchmaker replies only that the goods were lost in the river. He encloses a brief prayer with the letter, unsigned. Yet the city's unease echoes beneath even the most ordinary moments. At market stalls, women argue with vendors over inflated prices. Laborers whisper of uprisings. Preachers warn of divine correction. And inside his workshop, all these human stirrings fuse into a single rhythmic pattern. Tick, tick, tick. The sound of a world intent on surviving through repetition. Late one afternoon, while testing a pendulum spring, the younger apprentice cuts his hand. The wound is shallow, yet the sight of blood on tools unmoors the master's calm. He binds the boy's hand carefully, listening as the apprentice apologizes and laughs nervously. "Don't worry," the youth says. "The clock still beats, even if we falter." Something about the phrase strikes him deeply. That evening, he cannot work. He walks to the lake and sits until the lamps of the pier blur in his tears. The faceless clock advances slowly toward completion. Its body stands tall, narrow, almost human in shape, made of dark walnut polished to mirror finish. Inside, the mechanism turns with surgical precision. Weights, gears, an escapement entirely of his own invention. Yet when he winds it for the first time, no ticking is heard. It moves, but silently. The motion of its pendulum can be seen if one looks closely, breathing in intervals soft as heartbeats. He feels both triumph and dread. The clock seems to keep time independent of him, obeying laws beyond his touch. He notes this in his book, but leaves the page unfinished. That night, unease grips him again. If perfection can neither be heard nor seen, what does it serve? The question haunts his sleep, mingling with images of the nobleman's moon-painted watch, of Laurent's laughter, of the anonymous notes promising truth. He wakes before dawn and finds frost on the inside of the window, a rare thing in spring. Customers notice a change they cannot define. The watchmaker speaks less. He keeps the mysterious new clock behind a curtain, claiming it unfinished, though it plainly is not. Once, the bookseller asks if it will ever be sold. The craftsman answers calmly, "Some things are meant only to measure their own silence." The bookseller nods slowly, pretending to understand. As weeks pass, Geneva grows tense. New taxes on luxury goods drive many workshops into deficit. Rivals whisper that his inventions defy reason, that no clock without hands can claim accuracy. He lets them talk. The apprentices, too, begin to murmur restlessly, sensing secrets yet unspoken. One evening, they discover him asleep at his bench, beside an open drawer where the small cog left by the unknown sender still lies. Beside it rests a written draft of complex calculation, circles, ratios, and a short note. If truth waits still, then movement becomes faith. He awakens, sees their faces, and closes the drawer without rebuke. But from that day, the apprentices grow quiet. They work diligently, as if touched by the gravity of something sacred or dangerous. Midsummer brings heat oppressive enough to slow even the clocks. The air hums with gnats, and copper tools grow too hot to touch. The watchmaker's hands tremble slightly. At times he feels watched again, though it may only be fatigue. He finds letters slipped beneath his door more frequently, blank sheets, no words, only light impressions of writing that could not fully take. Each one ends up in the stove, curling to black before any meaning can emerge. Then, one night, as thunder swells beyond the city, he sets the faceless clock in motion a final time. Its pendulum begins to swing, soundless, yet perfect in rhythm. Around it, the air thickens with the storm's static pulse. Lightning flashes through the shutter cracks, rain drums the roof. In that white instant of brightness, he senses a harmony so precise that dread becomes awe. The world outside seems to move within the mechanism, as though time and weather obey the same hidden design. He sits until dawn, watching the motion without weariness, feeling a calm acceptance dissolve the edges of fear. When the storm subsides, the silence afterward feels deeper than noise ever did. The clock stands still gleaming, its pendulum continuing unseen. Morning finds the apprentices arriving early, drawn by something neither can explain. They find their master already at work, steady and gentle, as if renewed. He gives them simple instructions: polish, measure, dismantle the ordinary pieces of yesterday's commissions. Yet beneath that routine hums a quiet certainty. Something within him has aligned again, though not to worldly time. By summer's end, clients begin speaking of a new air in his workshop, the comfort of order without rigidity, contentment absent of pride. No one mentions the faceless clock directly, though some claim it hums faintly in the dark. He neither confirms nor denies. What matters now is the precision of softer things, how tea cools, how daylight bends across the floor, how each heartbeat answers its neighbor. Outside, Geneva's bells still mark their obedient hours. Inside, one clock measures only silence, and another, the man himself, has finally begun to measure peace within imperfection. The city may chase its minutes endlessly, but for him, time has become a quiet companion, walking step for step, asking nothing more than presence. Autumn settles heavily over Geneva. The lake's surface, once silver in sunlight, turns to pewter, reflecting skies streaked by bare branches. Merchants hurry to close their shutters early against the wind. The watchmaker's workshop, warmed by a coal stove, feels both smaller and safer than before. The faceless clock stands in a shadowed corner, motionless today, yet its silent presence pervades the room like an unspoken promise. For months he has tried to keep to ordinary affairs, customers, repairs, teaching his apprentices to distinguish the difference between proper precision and pride. Yet beneath that routine hums a faint vibration of unfinished purpose. The past, so carefully hidden behind drawers, lost letters, and unspoken debts, begins to breathe again. Rumors drift anew through the district. The constable has reopened the nobleman's case, not from conviction, but curiosity. A new official from Bern, young and ambitious, has arrived to clarify unresolved matters. When the constable visits once more, he carries not accusation, but conversation. They stand among the ticking creations as if surrounded by small mechanical witnesses. "Do you recall," the constable asks softly, "a friend named Laurent, who spoke often of alloys? He may have kept records beyond trade. Some ledgers found near the border mention your shop." The watchmaker meets his gaze, but answers calmly, "Records are how merchants excuse lies." The constable nods, neither convinced nor dismissive, and touches his hat in parting. After he leaves, the workshop feels hollow. The apprentices notice the master's silence, but know better than to intrude. At night, long after they depart, he unlocks the lowest drawer and removes the faintly blue cog left months before. Under lamplight, the metal still glows. He places it beside a sheet of paper, tracing its edges as if mapping an orbit. Thoughts assemble, not of guilt, but of understanding. Each part of this mystery has been a mechanism itself. The noble's vanity, Laurent's greed, his own caution, all driven by the same unseen spring, fear disguised as purpose. Soon after, a merchant's errand brings an unexpected visitor, a gaunt man with the nervous politeness of one burdened by confession. He introduces himself as Pierre, once assistant to Laurent. His eyes, dull with sleeplessness, dart toward the shelves where unfinished watches gleam. He speaks quickly, as if fearing his courage might fail. Laurent, he reveals, had planned to sell rare metals taken from the late nobleman, metals intended for secret commissions involving foreign inventions. Miniature timekeepers embedded in scientific instruments meant for navigation. The noble's death, Pierre claims, was not murder but accident, the result of confrontation between accomplices when payment was withheld. The watchmaker listens silently. The details match fragments he had guessed but never dared articulate. When Pierre finishes, he asks only one question. "Did Laurent steal the balance wheel?" The man hesitates, then shakes his head. "No, monsieur. He hid it. He meant to return it later. To clear your name, perhaps, and his own. But when the constable began to suspect, he fled the city. He drowned trying to cross." Pierre's voice falters. "I know because he sent me a note meant for you." From his coat he produces a folded paper, worn soft by handling. The watchmaker opens it slowly. The handwriting is unmistakable, Laurent's broad strokes more confession than apology. "Forgive me, old friend. The piece I took was not for gold, but to keep you safe. They were watching you, not me. If I could undo, I would." The words sink through him like water through cloth, leaving faint warmth and heavier sorrow. All those months of suspicion, anger, and fear crumble into silence. He thanks Pierre, offers a cup of wine, and listens as the man explains his wish to leave Geneva. "Too much time measures us here," Pierre says wearily. When he departs, the watchmaker feels the air lighten, though melancholy remains like residue at day's end. That evening, he returns to the Faceless Clock. Its pendulum rests idle, the weights untouched since the storm. With deliberate motion, he takes from the drawer the small blue cog and inserts it into the mechanism's concealed cavity. The fit is exact, impossibly so, as if foreseen by design. He winds the clock once. The mechanism stirs, emitting almost no sound, only a faint hum within the wood. Slowly, a subtle warmth spreads through the casing. It keeps perfect time again, though none can see it. Word soon spreads that his workshop glows faintly at night. Apprentices whisper that the master has found a way to build a clock that moves without winding. He dismisses talk, saying only that balance exists even without explanation. Yet inwardly, he knows the clock has become a kind of memorial, an unmarked gravestone rising from craft, uniting all who erred under its silent order. Days shorten. Leaves clog the gutters. The lake fog thickens into early snow. The watchmaker works steadily, finishing promised commissions, refusing elaborate offers. On the last day of October, he closes the shutters before dusk and begins writing his record. Not a confession, but a witness account of how greed can mirror devotion, how perfection demands compassion to survive. The pages form a quiet testament to craft and conscience, written in the same precise hand that once measured jewels. 1 week later, he walks to the noble family's estate, now decaying at the edge of town. The garden stands unkept, iron gates open to the wind. He carries with him a parcel wrapped in clean linen, the Faceless Clock's twin, made modestly of oak. In the empty salon where dust veils the faded grandeur, he sets the clock on the mantel, It ticks softly, its invisible count asserting the persistence of time over vanity. He leaves without note or name, only the steady heartbeat of the mechanism left behind. Back in his shop, the apprentices find him sitting by the fire, hands still, eyes distant. When asked about the new piece they saw him build weeks before, he answers gently, "Some things must measure sorrow before peace." They do not understand, but his tone is kind, and they return to work. In the days that follow, he senses the world loosen its hold. The constable stops by once more, this time merely to purchase a repaired pocket watch. The exchange is simple, cordial. When parting, the official remarks, "Geneva's hours seem steadier, thanks to men like you." The craftsman smiles faintly. He recognizes the irony, but accepts the sentiment. At night, as snow dusts the rooftops, he winds his tools back into their places, closes the shutters, and sits beside the faceless clock, listening to its perfect, soundless rhythm. Outside, the city murmurs, the creak of carts, the faint call of ferrymen, the distant tolling of cathedral bells. Each sound merges with the unseen tempo within the workshop. The mysteries that once haunted him no longer require answers. Truth, he realizes, was never lost, only quiet. The story of the nobleman, the merchant, and the watchmaker reduces to the simplest of patterns. A wound opened, a rhythm broken, and at last, stillness restored. In that quiet he finds what he sought since boyhood, not perfection, but grace within its absence. The air by the fireside softens as if time itself exhales. Outside, the night holds steady. Clocks across Geneva measure their obedient hours. But here, in this small refuge of brass and wood, one man keeps a different kind of time. He glances once toward the darkened window, where the snowfall begins anew, and feels no fear of what may come. The mechanism within him, long troubled, has finally found its balance. The years loosen their grip, the way snow yields to the thaw, slowly, without announcement. The watchmaker no longer measures them. His shop has changed hands to younger craftsmen. One of his apprentices, now a father, runs it with the same calm precision once taught at the bench. The master lives quietly beyond the city, in a narrow house where vines climb the shutters and the wind brings the scent of the lake through the cracked panes. Objects of his trade still fill the small study: worn tools, folded sketches, a jar of gears dull with age. Each carries some fragment of the man he was, yet none define him now. He spends mornings tending to a garden of thyme and sage, each plant trimmed with the same care once given to escapements and springs. In the afternoon, he repairs small things for neighbors: a chipped hinge, a child's toy, acts of use rather than pride. The Geneva he knew keeps turning beyond the hills, its bells unchanged, but their rhythm heavier. He hears that clocks grow cheaper now, assembled more quickly, their perfection uniform, but character lost. He bears no resentment. Progress, like time, resists argument. Mechanisms do what men ask, he tells a visiting apprentice, but seldom what they mean. The young man laughs, unsure whether this is philosophy or jest. The master only smiles and returns to his tea. Days follow the same kind of peace, once foreign to him, plain, quiet, secure. From his window, he watches fishermen along the lake, casting nets as dawn breaks over still waters. To him, their motions possess a certain harmony, like pendulums keeping invisible time. He wonders sometimes whether they know their labor resembles devotion. Perhaps devotion needs no knowledge, only endurance. One corner of the house remains unlike the rest. There stands a single clock, the faceless one. It ticks faintly, not loud enough to dominate silence, but steady enough to remind him that every breath belongs to a vast design. Its surface has darkened with years, polishing itself through patience. Children who visit the cottage ask why it lacks hands. He answers that it tells a kind of time grown-ups rarely need to know. Letters occasionally arrive from the city, ink faded by travel. Former apprentices write of their families, of workshops thriving, or of misfortunes, small and large. He answers with brief lines and careful words, encouragement, blessings, sometimes advice about craft or life. Each letter begins the same way. May your hands never learn haste. They respond with gratitude, unaware that such greetings are also confessions. Now and then, he walks into town on market days, a habit more for memory than necessity. The streets appear narrower, buildings taller, faces younger. He buys coffee in the square where his father once traded. The air smells as it always did, metal filings, damp stone, and the sweetness of roasted beans. Passing a clockmaker's stall, he stops to study a display of pocket watches shining under morning sun. Their balance wheels pulse in perfect unison. Beautiful, he thinks, but they sound like soldiers marching, not hearts beating. He remembers the nobleman's golden watch, Laurent's easy laughter, the frozen river, the faceless clock's first hum. Each returns not as pain, but as understanding. The story that once bound his life feels distant now, not erased, but softened. Experience has replaced urgency. Time, once foe and measure alike, has become a companion of gentle manners, an old friend who sits nearby without pressing conversation. Every evening before dusk, he winds the clock one half turn, a ritual performed more through gratitude than habit. The pendulum sways, breath-like. Sometimes he murmurs to it the way others speak prayers. On such nights, the room fills with warmth, not from the hearth, but from the sound itself, the low whisper of orderly persistence. He thinks of the years spent chasing precision, the faces of those lost in its pursuit, and feels them near again, his father's steady hands, Laurent's grin, the nobleman's faded eyes, even the constable's weary courtesy. All part of a mechanism larger than guilt or invention. When sleep takes him, it arrives easily now. Dreams turn from clocks and rivers to simpler landscapes. The glow of evening on brass, the green light through leaves, his mother's voice calling him to supper. The past moves at its rightful pace, slower each season, like a melody reaching its last gentle refrain. On the rare nights when storms roll across the lake, he listens to thunder drift through the valley and counts the seconds between flashes, an old habit he no longer corrects for precision. He tells himself the weather keeps its own counsel. The house creaks, the rain taps along the roof in patient rhythm. Between crashes, he hears the clock's faint pulse, unchanged. Sometimes, neighbors stop by, bringing milk or company. They speak of local elections, harvests, a new bridge to be built across the Rhone. He listens, responding with half smiles. After they leave, quiet settles once more, and he leans by the window, watching clouds dissolve. In the clear intervals, the stars seem closer than before, as if the heavens themselves have contracted with age. He imagines their light traveling through centuries, arriving just in time to mark this particular evening. When morning returns, he wakes not to alarm or obligation, but to the gentle glow of dawn leaking across the wooden floor. Outside, birds mark their first notes. Inside, the faceless clock keeps its unseen rhythm. He dresses slowly, washes in cold water, prepares bread and broth. His world, compact yet complete, asks nothing more of him than attention. On his desk lies a small watch once built for a fisherman who could never afford to collect it. The repair remains flawless, but the dial has tarnished, softening its white enamel into a mellow cream. He turns it in his palm, noting how the frost of age gives warmth rather than loss. "Everything that endures must change," he whispers, and sets it gently beside the window where the light catches its face. Near midday he sits outside, coat wrapped around thin shoulders. The sun warms his cheek. The faint gurgle of water in the irrigation ditch mingles with the sound of distant bells. He closes his eyes. There is nothing else to think or mend. For the first time, he feels that his life and his craft no longer differ. The same precision that once governed gears now governs rest. Inside, the clock, without a face, continues to mark its secret measure. No one can say whether it keeps time or keeps peace. But in this small cottage overlooking the patient water, a single rhythm endures, steady, humane, forgiving. And if one listens closely, between the hush of wind and the weightless chime of faraway bells, it can almost be heard saying, not the hours that pass, but the ones that remain.